Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. I would ask if you would be kind enough to silence your cell phones, any other electronic devices that you may have. Welcome. This is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, Seminole County Board of County Commission meeting.
Maybe it's Andrea.
We will call the meeting to order. We will ask Father John Blewett to lead us in the invocation, and then Mr. Bill Hyde will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I just found out that it's National Police Week, so we need to lift them up in a special way today as we begin our prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you for the gift of another day. In your wisdom and providence, you've set before us the responsibilities and challenges that we will face each day, and especially today. Help us to accept the fact that we are not perfect and so cannot respond perfectly, but help us to receive the patience, courage, and strength to do what needs to be done with generosity and compassion. Father in heaven, you hold this day in your hands, just as you have held every other day in our lives. We trust the needs that you put in front of us and hope that as we step forward, one step at a time, even though we do not know whether we will finally wind up where we want to be. May we always be grateful for your providential care of peace and comfort and decency, trusting that you will lead us in our challenges and in our continued efforts to make this the best and very best county of all counties. And we make this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Hyde.
Could you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Father, and thank you, Mr. Hyde. We sincerely appreciate your willingness to do that this morning. Our first item up is going to be our Veterans Proclamation. This will be read by Commissioner Lockhart. Commissioner?
Thank you. Commissioners, it is my honor to move the following proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners recognizing United States Air Force Senior Airman Patricia Murphy for her outstanding service to the United States and Seminole County. Whereas the brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force demonstrate a resolute spirit and unmatched selflessness, reminding us there are few things more American than giving of ourselves to make a difference in the lives of others. And whereas throughout our country's history, generations of service members have answered the call to leave their families, their jobs, and put their futures and even their lives on the line to valiantly defend our nation. And whereas for many service members, the sacrifice has ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in the continued preservation of our freedoms and the promise of liberty. And whereas there are more than 30,000 living veterans in Seminole County who serve our nation in times of peace and war, through their service, they kept America strong. Whereas Senior Airman Patricia Murphy enlisted in the United States Air Force on active duty in September 1995 and separated from the Air Force in September 1999. She was an aerospace ground mechanic assigned to a fighter wing and the only female mechanic in a flight of 100. She was stationed and completed her service in Elmendorf Air Base in Alaska. During her service, Senior Airman Patricia Murphy received an Overseas Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, and the Air Force Good Conduct Medal. And whereas Senior Airman Patricia Murphy lives in Oviedo and is the CEO and founder of Marketing Smarty Pants, providing end-to-end marketing services for growing small businesses. She is also the immediate past chair of the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, which promotes professional development and networking opportunities for local veteran-owned businesses who are currently established or are looking to establish resources and opportunities in the state of Florida with a concentration within Central Florida. And whereas Senior Airman Patricia Murphy has brought great credit and distinction upon herself, the United States of America, the United States Air Force, and Seminole County, now therefore be it proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for Senior Airman Patricia Murphy for her outstanding service to the United States, the Air Force, and residents of Seminole County. Be it further proclaimed that this proclamation is presented to Senior Airman Patricia Murphy, along with our sincere congratulations and recognition as Seminole County's Veteran of the Month, adopted this 13th day of May, 2025.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Congratulations, Ms. Murphy. We appreciate it. Ms. Murphy is not here today. Ms. Murphy was unable to make it today because of a emergency that she had this morning. On her behalf, Mr. Brian Fay is here to accept that proclamation. I've invited Ms. Murphy back at a later time. She desires to get a picture with the proclamation with the board. Any board meeting that she wants to come to, will be happy to do that. So we appreciate you being here, Mr. Fay, on her behalf, and please have a few words if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm an Army veteran. I served from 2007 to 2014. When I first got out, I started a small business and had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Murphy when she was doing her work with the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses. Anyone who's had the privilege of meeting her knows that, you know, she didn't just lead the way in the Air Force, being one of 100, the only female on a mechanic line. She continues to lead the way in her community. She always puts veterans first. She continues to make sure that veterans are striving for the best experience that they can when they get out. And I know that if she was here, she would say that she's undeserving of this award, and that, you know, she only hopes to make sure that veterans are continuing to have that best life that they can have. So thank you on her behalf. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you for being here today. Next, we're going to move to our county manager's consent agenda, items 3 through 24. If there's anyone here that is desiring to speak on items 3 through 24, please make sure you get a form outside in the lobby, fill it out, and bring it up and give it to the clerk, Ms. Dominique, here with her hand raised, so we can get you on to speak about any of those agenda items. I will now go to the county manager for any additions or deletions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Also, we have the constitutional officers item number 2, just to let you right before that as well.
Sure.
Just one item. I'm going to pull item number 13, and I'm going to be bringing that back at the next meeting, but just a few revisions I need to make. So I'll be bringing, that's the only one.
So number 13
Yes.
is being pulled?
Yes.
Great, thank you. We will now go to Ms. Kate Latour for the reading of the rules of public engagement. The county attorney, Ms. Latour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Florida law provides that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on propositions before the Board of County Commissioners, except when the board is acting on emergency or ministerial matters or conducting a meeting exempt from the requirements of the Sunshine Law. Individuals shall be permitted 3 minutes each for public comment, or 6 minutes when the individual is an official representative of a formal association or group. The chairman may modify the maximum time for public comment at his sole discretion when appropriate. Public comments on quasi-judicial or other public hearing items will occur during the board's consideration of those items this afternoon. Public comments on pending procurement matters or on non-agenda items shall not be permitted at this time. Members of the public desiring to make public comment must fill out a speaker form and present the form to staff, and forms are available in the lobby. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Latour. All right, we're going to go to items 2 and then 3 through 24, less 13. Madam Clerk, is there anyone here to speak on any of these items today?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment and go to board action, unless there's somebody who wants to pull any of those items.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no one that wants to pull one, I will move the item number 2, the constitutional officers' consent agenda item, as well as 3 through 24, not including 13.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Carries unanimous. Thank you all very much. Next item up is our regular agenda items. This will be item 25. This will be presented by Mr. Timothy Jex from Management and Budget.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, I'm Timothy Jex with the Office of Management and Budget. Item number 25 is our annual mid-year BAR to true up countywide fund balances. This item was advertised on Thursday, May 8th in the Orlando Sentinel. The primary purpose of this BAR is to reconcile budgeted FY25 beginning fund balances to the actual fund equities reported in the 2024 ACFR. The total amount of the BAR is $75 million. Of that, $32 million is revenue budgeted for 9 months of collections for the 4th Gen Sales Tax Fund. We had fund balance adjustments of $39.7 million, and there are which is 4.8% of the current $816 million. That is in the budget for beginning fund balances. Other adjustments include $2.9 million receivable for FEMA and $670,000 in interfund transfers. This slide was presented by the county auditor last month, which shows $90.3 million in unassigned fund balances reported in the ACFR. To give a little context for that number, the actual FY24 ending fund equity was $110 million in the general fund. This is total assets minus total liabilities. It is the auditor's practice to then assign ending fund balance to cover if there is a structural deficit in the following year. The FY25 budget had a $20 million adopted deficit, which brings us to our $90 million beginning fund balance reported in the ACFR. From there, we have $8 million in non-spendable assets, and then 2 BARs, which were approved in the current fiscal year, totaling $17 million. We had $5 million carry forward for the sheriff and $12 million carry forward for county projects. This leaves us with approximately $65 million as we move into next year's FY26 budget. So this slide shows a snapshot of the county-wide fund balances, which will be $856 million after this BAR. About 11% of this fund balance is in our general fund, totaling $102 million. Other fund balances were generated from revenues with restricted uses, which include $186 million in our water and sewer fund, $191 million in the infrastructure sales tax fund, $97 million in our 5 Points bond fund, and $81 million for fire services. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Jex. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. We'll go close public input and go to board action.
Mr. Chairman, I move item number 25, approving the BAR 25-035 as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jex. Item 26, reduction of lien request. This will be presented by Alexis Valley, Code Enforcement Clerk. Ms. Valley, welcome.
Good morning. Alexis Valley, Clerk to the Code Enforcement Office, presenting item number 26, a reduction of lien request. This property is located on a vacant parcel in Chuliota. The code enforcement violation is unpermitted signage. The request is to reduce the lien from $140,201.69 to $5,000. The previous property owner bought the property into compliance. The current property owner purchased this property through a quitclaim deed in 2024 and has provided written authorization for applicant to continue with this request. This case was originally cited in January 2022 for the Seminole County Code violation of unpermitted signage. On April 28, 2022, the Code Enforcement Board issued a findings of fact requiring compliance no later than May 19, 2022, or a fine of $100 per day may be imposed. on January 25th, 2023, the Code Enforcement Board issued an order finding noncompliance and imposing lien of $25,500 for 255 days of noncompliance, which will continue to accrue at $200 per day until brought into compliance. The affidavit of compliance states the property was rectified as of August 22nd, 2024, making the outstanding lien total $140,201.69. This table is a representation of the financial summary of the case. So it has the ownership date based on the new property owner, the 2024 assessed value, a breakdown of the daily accrued fines, administrative costs totaling $501.69, and then the total of the lien again. The review criteria. As the Deputy County Manager determined this request did not fail threshold Seminole County Code criteria, the following was evaluated: the amount of the lien as compared to the value of the property. The amount of the lien exceeds the 2024 certified assessed value of the property. The actions taken or not taken by the property owners in attempting to abate the violation. The previous property owner rectified the violations prior to the current ownership by removing the unpermitted signage physically off the property. And lastly, the amount of staff time expended. The non-compliance period spanned approximately 3 years with a collective of 12.25 hours per staff affidavits. Request for reduced amount. The applicant requests that the board make an exception to its established guidelines and reduce the total amount secured by the lien to the lesser amount of $5,000. The applicant requests that the board additionally consider the following. 1, medical hardship. Applicant states, this situation arose due to genuine miscommunication and unforeseen health issues of his brother, who was initially in charge of managing the property. Once the applicant was fully aware of the issue, he remedied the violation. And 2, administrative costs. Applicant is not requesting a reduction or waiver of the administrative costs. However, the applicant does request a return of the $500 application fee if possible. The applicant requested action. The applicant requests that the board consider and make final determination on applicant's request for a reduction of the lien to $5,000, and should the lien amount be reduced, authorize the chairman to execute a satisfaction of lien upon payment of the approved reduced amount, if any. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Valley. Any questions for staff? Seeing none. Ms. Dominique, is there anyone here to speak from the public on this item?
No, sir.
Okay, well.
The applicant is actually here.
Applicant, Mr. Nikolai, if you would like to come up, please. Up to the podium.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yeah, so I just can't believe we're here doing this right now at this kind of price. It was this big misunderstanding. My brother understood to take the sign down, so he took it down and left it there on the ground. It's not like there was a sidewalk there. It was like deep into our property. Matter of fact, when we found out of what's going on, we went out there to look for this sign. We couldn't find it. So I actually had to get out of the car, and Chris was following me so we could find this sign. So Mike just understood to take it down, not to remove it. It was just big miscommunication at the end of the day.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Herr.
When did they, I guess, lay it down? Is that what happened? At
Yes,
some point?
he took it down. He laid it
And left
down.
it on the property, laid it down?
Yes.
What was the timing of that?
I don't know. I'm not sure. So, yeah, here we are. I mean, we know how to follow, we've owned Giovanni's restaurant for 32 years. We follow the rules with the, health department, fire department. We follow rules, and it was a big miscommunication at the day, so.
Any further questions? No public request to speak on this, correct?
Correct, no, sir.
We'll close public input and go to board action. Thank you, Mr. Nicolai.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I see that the paperwork's been filed, and as a request, I'd like to make a final determination of the applicant's request for the reduction of the lien to $5,000, and should the lien amount be reduced, authorize the chairman to execute a satisfaction of the lien upon payment of the approved reduced amount as submitted here today.
Second.
Motion is second. I do have a question under discussion.
Sure.
They are requesting a refund of the $500 application fee.
The motion stands as is of $500.
Fair enough.
$5,000.
Any other
sorry.
conversation? Commissioner Herr.
I think we have a missing fact here, so I'm all about reducing a lien. What I'm not about is rendering our code absolutely useless. And so if the neighbors, in fact, struggled for years with what sounds like a commercial sign in their neighborhood, then somebody's got to represent for them over the years that they tolerated that. And so I do struggle with the idea that there's very little consequence, $5,000 on property that was quitclaim deed. I struggle with this. Every time we do this, I struggle with this because I don't even know why we have this code. In all honesty, from a business perspective, and this is not relevant to your specific property, but from a bigger perspective of how do we manage good behavior in neighborhoods that expect to have a lifestyle based on the zoning that we put in place and based on our ability to enforce something. And part of that is what we do up here. So that, I just think what we do matters.
Commissioner Lockhart.
So I will support the motion, but I concur with Commissioner Herr's comments, and I'm looking forward to a new era in code enforcement and some fresh eyes on our whole process, and hopefully we'll start to see some of those remedies taking place.
I concur. Any other discussion?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, we all have those same sentiments, and that's the reason why we're trying to make the steps as we move forward with the code enforcement.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Thank you all for being here. Next item up is item 27, reduction of lien request. This also will be presented by Ms. Valley. Ms. Valley?
Good morning. Alexis Valley, Code Enforcement Clerk, presenting item number 27, reduction of lien, located on 345 Feather Place in Longwood. The code enforcement violation is for a dilapidated fence. The request is to reduce the lien from $233,772.59 to $2,200. The current property owner brought the property into compliance. The current property owner obtained the property via a certificate of title in 2015. This case was originally cited in March 2018 for the Seminole County Code violation of a dilapidated fence. On September 27th, 2018, the Code Enforcement Board issued a findings of fact requiring compliance no later than October 12th, 2018, or a fine of $100 per day may be imposed. On January 24th, 2019, the Code Enforcement Board issued an order finding noncompliance and imposing a fine of /lien of $10,400 for 104 days of noncompliance, which will continue to accrue at $100 per day until brought into compliance. The affidavit of compliance states the property was rectified as of March 6, 2025, making the outstanding lien total $233,772.59. This is a financial summary of the case. It does shows the conveyance type, certificate of title with a special notation of a certificate of disbursement, indicates no money was received / dispersed from the sale. And the 2024 assessed value of the property, the daily fines accrued, and the administrative costs totaling $372.59. Review criteria. As the Deputy County Manager determined this request did not fail threshold Seminole County Code criteria, the following was evaluated. The amount of the lien as compared to the value of the property. The amount of the lien is less than the 2024 certified assessed value of the property. The actions taken or not taken by the property owners in attempting to abate the violation. The applicant rectified the violation by installing a new fence. The applicant provided a screenshot of an approved status for a fence permit via the county permits section on the county website as of March 31st, 2020. The amount of staff time expended. The non-compliance period spanned approximately 7 years with a collective 8.25 hours of staff time per staff affidavits. request for reduced amount. The applicant requests that the board make an exception to its established guidelines and reduce the total amount secured by the lien to $2,200. The applicant requests that the board additionally consider the following. Upon researching the status of a fence permit for the property, the applicant has submitted a screenshot of the permit status showing approved 5 years prior to this request. Applicant requests an action. The applicant requests that the board consider and make a final determination on an applicant's request for a reduction of the lien to $2,200, and should the lien amount be reduced, authorize the chairman to execute a satisfaction of lien upon payment of the approved reduced amount, if any. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, Commissioner Constantine, you got a question?
If the applicant is here.
That's where I'm going next.
Yeah, I do have some questions.
Is there anyone here from U.S. Bank Trust Bank?
I'm actually Joyce Sanders, the Realtor.
All right, give us your name and address for the record, please.
Joyce Sanders, Florida Real Estate Properties, 397 Kyber Springs Road.
Please proceed.
The violation initially stated that the violation had not been cured, and I did talk with the fence company that installed the fence to determine that in fact it had been, permit had been filed and closed and approved, and I think in March 2020. So all those dates that we have accrued here were not relevant because the violation had in fact been taken care of March 2020. So $2,200 I think is still a lot, but I would wish that it could be even lower than that since the violation was cured.
Very good. Commissioner Constantine, you had a question, and then Commissioner Lockhart.
I have of staff, but.
Okay, Commissioner Lockhart.
Do you have I'm going to say evidence, a letter, something that shows that it was in compliance on that date?
Yes, I got a printout from Dave from the Seminole County that I got from the fence company. Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind passing that down. Is this in our packet? It is?
Okay.
Does it look like this in our packet? Because that's why, okay. Discussion for future time, that doesn't, I understand now why that says what that says, but that column doesn't communicate to me that that's what that was.
Oh, I see.
It says something date. It doesn't say cured or fixed or.
In compliance.
It doesn't, yeah, there's nothing there that indicates that to me, so thank you. I'm glad I asked.
Let's see.
Okay.
That's the other part.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much, ma'am. Stand by.
Okay.
And Commissioner Constantine, you have a
Yes.
question for staff.
Yes, Alexis, where did the 2,200 come from?
2,200 is the applicant request for the reduced amount.
Was there was there any consistency in that, or is just that was a number that they came up with?
It was a number that she came up with. If I could, per the snapshot of the screen of our website, the only issue is that there wasn't communication with the code enforcement officer to do that reinspection of the property and confirm compliance. So that's for the years of time collected.
Well, I do understand that and I want to concur with what everybody said at the last one. I'm saying it again. But I do understand that the timeline here for the summary of the case actually, should change March 2025 to March 2020. But even that, at $100 a day plus the $10,000 is over $46,000. So it's still not. We're still not talking about anything, but I did want to know where the 2,200 came from. It seems that was their suggestion.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion?
Oh, tread lightly, my friend.
I know, that's a
Careful.
very difficult thing, but I just, as a recommendation by staff, do they have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, just point of order.
Sure.
It's difficult to ask staff to reflect on this on the fly, and I think that if we're going to be doing that, I think we need to ask staff to look at all the information appropriately, then report back to us instead of just putting one staff person on point and giving us an answer.
Counterpoint of order, I already asked during my discussions with staff, I did not with you, young lady, but with Jose, asked him if they had a recommendation, and that's why I was getting to that.
Okay. Jose, would you care to come up, please, sir?
Jose Gomez, Development Services Director. Based on the, the violation and based on the time period, I believe that $2,200 is appropriate.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear from you. Thank you very much, Jose.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Let me go to the public first, make sure we have no
I
public.
thought-
Anybody here from the public to speak on this matter?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close public input and go to the District Commissioner, Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you very much. As I said, I will agree with everybody, and we're all looking forward to the new day dawning. I will move that, one question. Alexis or Jose, what percentage actually come in for reduction of lien? Because I think that was implied that everybody does, but not that anybody said that, but I'm just saying, what percentage, do you know? Is it a high percentage?
They typically come in for the reduction of lien when they're going to sell or when it comes up in a title search. I don't have a number for the percentage. That's
Okay.
something, Alexis, that you have.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
There's not a percentage, but for this year alone, I believe there's been 10 in total. So, but the year prior, there really weren't that many, so it just varies per year.
Thank you, Alexis.
Well, and I think some of that is the focus we've put on this.
Yes,
And
I agree.
staff time committed to do this in anticipation of
So,
what's coming up.
with that, I'm going to make...
County Manager has a point.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. And one good news for all this, if we could find some good news on it, is that we did hire our new code enforcement manager, John Martin. He actually started this week. He should be here this afternoon, so I want him to introduce to all of you. One of the first priorities that we are going to be working with him, with Mr. Gomez and the team, is to go back and look at all of these high liens that we have on these properties and just started to clean a lot of those up, because we know eventually where they're going to come. They're going to come in front of you all. And so we're going to be working on a plan and a program for that. So we are making progress. You will, actually in that mid-year budget amendment that you just did, we also put our code enforcement officers in there as well, so we will all be ready to get up and running on October 1.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to reduce the lien request to $2,572.59. That's $2,200 plus the administrative cost of $372.59.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Lockhart.
On the same topic, is there a backlog of these that we are?
We are experiencing some now. I'll have, Jose, do you know if there is a backlog of continuing code enforcement liens that want to be reduced?
I noticed the date on some of these was quite some time ago, and we're getting them,
Yeah, there was a backlog initially as we were working with the county attorney's office to make sure we got our process down. However, now we're bringing them in as they come forward.
Okay, so we're not slow dripping them. We're completely up to date right now.
Yes, we're completely up to date
Okay.
now.
Yeah, okay.
All right. I will verify all
A
that.
hesitant yes.
I know.
It was, well, I mean, it's
And
okay.
fairly hesitant, yes.
And
That's
so
fair.
my point in asking that question is, if you are holding any of these back for the purposes of agendaing, or there being a plethora of them on one agenda, I'm one board member, but I would say, load us up, let's get them done, rip the Band-Aid off, and let's not just death by 1,000 paper cuts when these drip.
Understood.
Okay.
Anything else? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Next item up is item number 28, Wekiva Island Springs and Strings Summer Kickoff Special Event Permit. Ms. Kathy Hamill will present this item.
Good morning, Kathy Hamill. I'm presenting a special event for the Wekiva Island Spring and Strings Summer Kickoff. The Spring and Strings is a two-man band that will be playing in front of the Tooting Otter General Store, and that will be from 4 to 9 p.m. on May 29th. Since the applicant is requesting amplified sound and they are extending their hours from 7 to 9 p.m., it requires the special event permit to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Staff finds that the request meets the requirements of the Seminole County Land Development Code, and since it is limited and temporary in nature, and security is being provided, and the conditions imposed by the special event permit, staff is requesting that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Wekiva Island Spring and Strings Summer Kickoff Special Event Permit for May 29th. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hamill. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, is the applicant from Wekiva Island here to speak or desire to speak? Okay. Anyone from the public to speak on this matter?
No, sir.
Seeing no one from the public, we'll close public input, and we will go to the district commissioner, as Commissioner Constantine, and board action.
Yes. First of all, I'm going to move to approve the special events permit for the Wekiva Island Springs and Strings Summer Kickoff on May 29th.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign? Carries unanimously.
And Mr. Chairman, before we move to the next item, and we have Carrie in the audience, I did want to also say that we have changed the special events permit where folks do not, after they do it the first time, do not have to come back unless it's substantial change. The development order with Wekiva Island does specify that each and every time they do have to come in because of the concerns with the neighbors. I proactively went back to talk to both the Weinogs and Carrie, as well as the homeowners in the Sweetwater Springs area. Both sides agreed to a change in the development order, which would then allow the staff to approve it administratively and would not have to come back to us if it's not changed. So I'm not asking to do that now. What I'm asking for you, and I'll make a motion if it's appropriate, that we ask the staff to bring that back to us so that we can approve it, the change in the development order.
I would say for cleanliness and keeping the record straight, if you're going to make a motion on this item, I think that would be appropriate. And then if we want to direct staff or ask staff to do that as a side issue, I'm happy to do that.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm not asking together. I'm not combining it. I could do it during my my report.
Sure.
But I just thought that while Carrie was here and she could say that yes, they have agreed to it, that we could do it now too and just get it off the board.
Chairman, I'd like to hear from our attorney.
Well, I was going to say that you made the motion, it was seconded, and you voted on it, correct?
Correct.
We have,
On the other one.
so that action, we've disposed of the application. I think you're bringing up a new issue for staff to amend the DO. We have a process for property owners to amend, to ask the board to approve an amendment to the DO. A little unorthodox for the county to ask to amend the DO unless it were to serve some sort of public purpose. But, I mean, there's a process for the DO to be amended if they wanted to undertake that process.
And all I'm saying is that I believe that both sides saw that they could agree, so it's not really one side or the other. And working with Ms. Hamill and working with Jose, we came up with something, and we gave it to both sides, and they both agreed to it. So I don't want to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but it's something that we all know that we have struggled with sometimes when they've come up. So I'm just trying to to do something that's efficient and effective for the citizens. If I have to do it at some other time, Kate, or is this appropriate to do it at this time?
Well, we'll take board direction, on this
I don't see what,
matter.
I'm just saying, I'm not asking for you to vote on the agreement. I'm asking to allow the staff to bring it back. That's all I'm saying.
Chairman?
Commissioner Lockhart's had her hand up for quite some time. Let me go to her and I'll come back.
So if whatever the regular process would be for amending a development order is initiated, I will just say that my inclination is to go ahead and take the opportunity that while that's opened, there will be some items that I would be interested in changing in that DO. So if we're going to open it up, from my perspective, then we're opening it up, not just to this one issue. So I want to put that out as fair warning to whomever thinks that's going to be streamlining. There are some other things out there that I think need to be addressed that haven't been for years, so this might be a great opportunity to address those.
Commissioner Herr.
I think it needs to follow the established process, that we shouldn't pull one DO off of the table and bring it up here. I think if the applicant wants to do, for that exact reason, that if we're going to do that, then we're having a discussion, we're not prepared, they're not prepared, not good for either side of that equation. So I'd like to, if the applicant believes that they want to bring it back and we do it, we do it. I would also say that I very much appreciate, Commissioner Constantine, you taking a proactive step on that, because it has been difficult for all sides of this equation. So I love the notion that we're going to get proactive on this and maybe improve it, but I'd like it to go through the full process.
Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that Commissioner Constantine, I'm not trying to speak for him, he's trying to be proactive, as Commissioner Burr was talking about, and we are aware, as well as he is, that the applicant is the one that needs to make the application, as the attorney just stated. He's just bringing it to our attention that both parties are agreeing and asking staff to go through the proper paperwork to bring it back to us at the appropriate time. I believe that was his intent.
That was the intent. But
I'm not trying to speak for him,
and I
but
thank you
that's
very
what I
much.
took from it.
That's what the intent is. But also, I have to say that it was specific to this one item of having to bring it back, because I know that that has been a point of contention for some of us. And both sides are pretty happy right now with the process and the DO. If we're going to change it, I don't think either one of them, may want to bring it back. And that's all I'm saying. It was on this one.
There's a food trap, grease trap issue that I think probably has been hanging out there for a while that could be addressed if we'd like to do that too.
Right now, if, it was just on this. I'm hearing what people want to do. The process would be that one or the other would ask for the change in the DO. If I was trying to, as I said, circumvent the situation and make it more efficient, I'm going to withdraw my request right now, because I can't speak for either party as far as any other changes.
Well, my input on that is there's two provisions here. It's not something that we would want to take up spur of the moment at a meeting, because there is a process in place to be followed. But I find absolutely no ill will or anything wrong with a district commissioner urging or suggesting that the applicant and the neighbors, if they desire to do something with the DO, that they go through the process, and staff obviously would work with them. I took it as just a matter of fact, this is something we might want to look at. But I didn't in any way, shape, or form take it as direction being given. But it's not something we would bring up during spur of the moment in the middle of the meeting on this issue.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, I wasn't asking you to vote on it. The spur of the moment was just a point in time that both sides were agreeing to something, and all I wanted to do was allow the staff to bring back something which they know that both sides agreed to. Let me just say one other thing. I know that we have at the county commission level have instigated a change in development orders before without either party doing it. So it wasn't a question of one party having to pay the fee to change the DO or anything. This was simply a moment in time. I saw an agreement that would save us time, and I know we're all about efficiency and effectiveness, change, and let the staff approve if there is no significant changes in any of the development order. However, we can still be hearing the Christmas request or whatever they call that, and the paint out and this every year if we want to do that too.
Any further input? Seeing none, we will move on to our work session. So thank you very much for you all being here that are inclined that they have other places to be. As we work into our work session, our first work session will be the Land Development Code update. This is work session number 2. Jose Gomez, Development Services Director, and Eliza Juliano from Kimley Horn, our consultant.
Yes, good morning. Jose Gomez, Development Services Director. So I'm here to introduce Eliza Giuliano from Kimley Horn and Associates, who's our consultant that's been working on Land Development Code changes. And this will be the work session number 2, and she'll walk you through the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Eliza.
Very good.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
So just to quickly go through the background again, there was a significant update to the zoning chapter that was adopted in the beginning of 2024, including targeted updates to portions of the Land Development Code, and yet we're back here again. So the reason we're back here again is because in the interim, there was an update to the comprehensive plan, which mandated certain updates to the certain additional updates to the Land Development Code, as well as created policies that would imply the need for additional updates. In addition, there were some community-identified issues as well as staff-identified issues that were too late in the process to be adopted as part of the 2024 update, so we are dealing with those at this time. We are here. We've had the first work session. This is the second work session. We anticipate a third work session, actually drafting the code updates over the summer, and then bringing this back to you with hearings in the fall. Some of what we talked about at the first workshop was fence permitting, which we were directed to move forward on, with clarifying what the exemptions are, as well as what the design and materials requirements are that are for all fences, not just those that are waiving the fence permit requirement. In terms of I-4 signage updates, this is having taller signs near the I-4 interchanges. That was directed to move forward with additional review of the site selection, because it was not every single interchange that was addressed by that. We also talked about general sign code updates, which would move forward. We talked about some minor updates to the PD approval process, which was significantly updated prior, but minor updates based on limited recommendations from the staff and the consultant that the board agreed with, as well as moving forward with the centers and corridors overlay map, which is required by the comprehensive plan to be drafted, but there are some options in how that might be drafted. We were directed to move forward with the recommended map. So that was last time. Now moving into this time, we're going to be talking about these 6 topics, several of which are interrelated. The first is the affordable housing density bonus. Then we'll talk about zoning districts within the LDR future land use district. We're going to talk about zoning for small lot mixed use, as well as open space buffer standards and walls and fences for commercial properties and subdivisions. There's also a number of future topics that are going to be addressed, and you can see those on the screen. I won't walk through every single one of them because there's quite a number. So let's launch into the affordable housing density bonus. This is one of those updates that's explicitly required by the updated comprehensive plan. There has long been a density bonus for affordable and workforce housing within the comprehensive plan. What has changed is that how that density is calculated has moved to the Land Development Code, and that allows the board to be more responsive to the market, more responsive, for instance, if the bonus is not being used. So the policy purpose of having a density bonus is to get affordable and workforce housing density built. The history is not very much got built, if any, got built under that provision. So in order to make the program more responsive, it's been moved to the Land Development Code. Another thing that has not changed is the specific densities that are associated with that bonus. So you see those at the bottom of the screen. Those were not changed in the recent update. Those are the same quantities of bonus that have been available for a long time. So the LDC will define how affordable and workforce units are determined in terms of how many affordable workforce units you have to provide in order to get a certain number of density bonus units. Essentially, what is that ratio? How are we going to do that? We're going to run pro forma tests. And essentially, we're going to do developer math to determine how much bonus a developer would really need in order to incentivize a number of affordable units or workforce units. The anticipated outcome is a range of density bonuses that would incentivize developers to incorporate these affordable or workforce units at different levels. So for instance, if you're providing housing at a very low income range, we would expect you would need a bigger bonus in order to offset the cost of providing that very low income unit. If you're providing a moderate income unit, you would need less of a bonus in order to incentivize provision of that moderate income unit, just because of the difference in cost. So the next steps is coordinating with the Community Services Department, which is the department within the county that's responsible for these the affordability issues within the community, as well as reaching out to affordable housing developers. One question that we will ask those groups, as well as we'd like to ask you, is whether there's any specific income band that you think has a greater shortage of supply than other income bands. So there's a couple of ways we would make these decisions in terms of how to weight the bonuses. Like I said before, the primary one is what is the actual cost to developer to provide that unit. But if we said, well, actually our shortage isn't very low income, it's moderate income, then we might up the bonus a little bit in that category to incentivize more activity in that band. So that's the thinking behind that. What we're looking for right now is direction to move forward with this approach, to actually go out and do those calculations and do the collaboration in order to determine what those bonus ratios might be. And that's the end of the affordable housing density bonus conversation. I can keep moving at the discretion of the chair. Or
do we have any questions on this topic? Commissioner Constantine.
Well, I have a general question. The latest, or at the last minute, they added some things about on Senate Bill 180 concerning changes in LDC and comp plans. Is any of this going to be affected by that, since they retro dated it to August 24, 2024?
We'll make sure to review that. The legislative session has been a moving target and is not even quite over.
I know,
so.
and this was an amendment that was put in on an emergency management bill. And Tricia, I don't know if you were aware of that, but a lot of people come out. It was kind of snuck in NASA. I see that. So the whole comp plan from now until what, 27? NASA is what they said. I think it's now until 2027. You can't make any changes or anything like that on LDC.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a full review of what we've gone back and done, and then make the determination whether that's considered a change under the new statute. And we will look at this for the future.
The only other thing I would say, since the question was asked about density bonuses in affordable housing, our median, our 120 median income is like over 90,000, and there are a lot of developments out there that are put in that price range, if you will. So if you're asking about density bonuses, I would look at the 80%, because quite frankly, I remember when they were asking for the live local 75% off or 100% off your taxes, ad valorem taxes, and there were 750 units that are asking it at, if I recall, and it was approximately 750 units that were asking at it for 120%, but only 7 that were asking for it at 80%. And if we really want to be honest with ourselves, it's 80%. That is the level of need in this community. I think that because of our income range, most people at $90,000 can afford the middle affordable housing.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Lockhart.
So rather than, this is it's a sticky topic, because if you are a school teacher making $42,000 a year and you are living on your own in one of these affordable units and you decide to get married or take a roommate or whatever that may look like, and I'm not picking on teachers, I'm just using it as an income level. Love my teachers. How do you, at what point do you say, well, you're no longer eligible, and how do we keep up with that income level? And what happens when people get promoted and do they have to qualify annually? My brain is just going through how do we set that level?
So, Nasa Borker, Deputy County Attorney for the record. So there's a monitoring system with these affordable housing complexes that goes through our Community Services Department. And there's a reporting requirement from the, complex that they're required to report on these yearly leases and the income levels by year. That's all I can say as to it. I know generally how it works. I can't get into specifics, but we definitely can get that information for you from Community Services.
Yeah, I agree we need to set a level where there is the greatest need. I just get into the weeds very quickly in my brain, and I start thinking about how we're going to set that, and when we set it, who are we alienating in that process that might also benefit very much from subsidized, a discount on, anyway. All that to say, I don't have an answer for you. I want more input.
And I do believe that the income levels are different for different household sizes, so that is part of the answer to that question.
Yes. I understand. But if you've signed up for a lease and you've given your income information, and then at some point in time your situation changes, I was just curious how frequently that gets looked at.
Commissioner Herr.
I can tell you how that works in New Jersey.
It doesn't.
Well, you don't report it, and that's a whole separate conversation. The legal apartment, the illegal apartment, all of that. But I'm going to take us up to 100,000 feet and tell you that if my input falls into a whole different realm, I think one of the challenges that we have in Seminole County is this sudden urbanization by virtue of apartments. And we've all heard me say up here it's supply and demand, and I'm going to support apartments where they need to be supported. What we're missing is affordable housing.
Right.
Opportunities for young professionals, for police, fire, teachers, nurses, to live in our community in a home that they own so they can live the American dream. The American dream is not to live in an apartment that's affordable, or, God forbid, a luxury apartment, which is an affordable apartment with granite countertops. I think that we should try to be different in that respect. And I realize that's the ultimate challenge given the price of land in this county and the availability of land in the county. But there are a lot of other opportunities that may be out there for ownership that we're bypassing because of the explosion of apartments.
And may I ask a follow-up question? Are you specifically focused on, could that include ownership in multi-unit buildings, for instance?
Absolutely. I'm not specifically focused. I'm asking you guys to get us specifically focused around ownership opportunities. What I have been told is that the insurance crisis is driving a significant amount of that due to the collapse of the building in South Florida. So multi-story is difficult to insure, et cetera, et cetera. I think that may be a contributor. It is not necessarily exclusionary. And quite honestly, easy out. That's not where we want to be.
So from my perspective, I believe the market need will drive the information that you need, and I think, I'm okay with you all going out and gathering that. But a couple things to somewhat counter to Commissioner Herr. I've interacted with a lot of younger people these days who have zero interest in owning anything they have to take care of. I wonder why they're living in an apartment with a couple of children. And, well, they like to travel. They'd rather travel instead of putting their money into an ownership that they continue to have to pay insurance for, property taxes, albeit they're paying that through their rents. But the big issue that I see on this bonus, how do we incentivize the builders to do it? You give the density, but it was just brought up, and it's the exact conversation I've had with many developers. They don't necessarily have a problem doing affordable housing, whatever range that is that we might decide and come back with, but they are not equipped to do the monitoring and tracking and reporting that's required by our community services and by statute to do those types of things. So I would add to that discussion with developers, great, just write a check. That can go to community services for affordable or attainable housing in lieu of them not having the ability to do the record keeping and tracking of that. Because there are developers who do affordable housing. I mean, that is their niche market. But the majority of them are not. Most of those don't necessarily have a problem doing affordable housing, but it's bringing on all the staff and keeping up with the legislative changes as it moves through that they can't react to. It's just not in their business model. So several developers that I've spoke to said, yeah, we would just soon write a check. I don't know what that percentage is or what that number looks like, but I think we can rely on our staff to see what may be going on in other municipalities and bring something back to us. But I think at the end of the day, the market will drive the need on those price points. I think we also have to be very aware that the decisions we make here on all land use topics and our land development code and everything that goes along with it can directly impact the affordability of homes. Because the more red tape we throw in and the more we require people to do, the costlier that product is to build. Add the insurance portion to it, add to the property tax portion of it, you've now just priced somebody right out of the market. That includes impact fees and all the other fees that we have to charge, in order to develop, a said piece of property. Commissioner Constantine and Commissioner Delary.
Did you have?
I'll bring it up another time.
That's all, Commissioner, that's all well and good. The problem is that it's not us that are making them do all the requirements. It's the state and it's the statutes. The fact of the matter is that there are a great, we have all, whether it be us, whether it be the state legislature, everybody is trying to find, they've used everything that comes up now that they're saying that we need to do, they use it in the affordable housing. What we're dealing here now, though, is with the fact that we're talking about increasing density. And in increasing density, I think there has to be a reason, a real reason. That's why I'm sitting there. I agree with you. A lot of young people don't want homes. Now, I agree with the commissioner that we would, it would be great if we could find a way to really push the availability of true home ownership, because I think that is greatly important. But all that aside, we're talking here about density. And we need to look at what the need is. A person, whether it's a firefighter or anyone else that's making $90,000, I don't think is really concerned as much about, and I'm like you, I don't want to use a specific, employment type. But people that are making $90,000, there's really not a situation where they have one or two alternatives. People that are making $42,000 would qualify for this would be at the 80%. And that's where I think that's where our need is in this county. We have a lot of, mid to luxury apartments and condominiums, and quite frankly, condominiums right now, because of the new safety standards, the maintenance fees are so high that people can't afford the maintenance fee. Forget about their mortgage payment. So what we're talking about here, though, is who we're going to give density increases to. And to me, in giving direction to the staff, I would say move it as much as we can to those people that need shelter the most. And that would, to me, would be those that are making the 40, the 50, the 60,000, are either living alone or with a roommate, and are doing service industry jobs, because that's mostly where we're doing, and this county needs that too. So that's where I'm saying on this specific thing, because all of us are right, we're talking about 1,000 feet issues or 10,000 feet issues, but getting more the specific, we need to give those that are really doing the true need of what this county has, and that is at the lower end, and therefore those should be getting the density bonuses. There's a lot of other things, and I just want, in the housing department and the tax agreements and everything else that affordable housing developers use, that's all out of our hands. Other than we can approve some of the things, but what's in our hands is how much density they get, and that's where I'm saying we need to go to the people that really need it.
Commissioner Delory, then Commissioner Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate everyone's comments. Everyone's making some good, valid points. But in the timeline or the next steps, I'd like to also look at best practices. What have other people have done, not just here locally, but in the region or beyond the region. Everything's going to be market-driven, and depending upon what the market happens to the market, it's going to vary. But when you talk about density bonuses, what does that do to the infrastructure around that area? So the questions that I have is best practices, what's the market, needs to be all market-driven, what's going to happen to the infrastructure when it comes to increased density, and as some of the commissioners talked about is in your timeline, you talk about affordable housing developers. There's other developers that are out there that, how do you entice them? And that's going to find out through best practices. And so I'd like to get that information as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lockhart?
Do we have the data that answers that question? Are there specific income levels where there is a greater housing need? Do we have the answer to that?
We don't at this time.
Okay.
I think Community Services does track that to a certain extent.
So I would love for someone who actually has the data to help me determine that answer, rather than just, I don't disagree with what's been said, but I'd love to actually see it on paper if possible. And then I think as important as income levels for density, I think it has to be the right location. I don't think that pure zoning on its own, just because it is zoned X and able to be multiplied by X and the income level is Y, that then I think there needs to be some ability to use discernment on specific properties, because all properties are not created equal, even though they may have the same zoning classification, if that makes sense. Does that, if something is on a main county road, an arterial road, versus deep within a neighborhood that's already existing, they may have the same zoning, but they may not have the same impact on the neighborhood. So I'm not sure.
But it's currently only available in certain zoning categories, correct? As it stands today?
So in terms of the comp plan, it's driven by the LDR. It's driven by the future land use district.
Excuse me for using zoning instead of flu.
Yeah. So I think the criteria location is an excellent point and something that we need to look at, maybe distances from transit and existing centers where some of the lower income folks can get there, because a lot of them may.
Jose, can you talk into the microphone, please? So we
Sorry,
can
so
all
a lot
hear
of
you.
them may not have vehicles, a lot of them may not, so I think that's an excellent point of not every location being exactly properly suited, and looking at some of that, that's something we can look at as well as we go through this.
And I don't know what that looks like. I just don't want someone to think just because they have a future land use of a certain number that their specific property automatically would give them that density bonus if it is just not the right fit and the right location. That's just my 2 cents.
I would also note that at least, looking at MDR and HDR, the bonuses are fairly moderate, which is not something we're tasked at looking at this time. And MXD is pretty limited in where it's located. So there's already some built-in locational.
From 30 to 50.
And to that point, maybe we should look at our impact fee corridors as probably the best delineator of where some of this bonus should take place, which is in the core spine of the county along the 1792 corridor, which has all the things that Commissioner Lockhart just mentioned already in place, as well as lower cost to build from an impact fee standpoint. But I think at the end of the day, I think we're all really pretty much saying the same, is the market need should drive our decision-making process. We're just saying it maybe in a little different fashion. But I will tell you, when it comes to best practices, what I will share with you is sitting as your representative on the AHAC, and Community Services tracks this pretty closely. We do have multiple times a year where we are on the phone or Zoom meetings with jurisdictions from all around the state. What I will tell you is there are people doing some things that don't work so good. There's very few doing much that actually is moving the needle. And I think a lot of that has to do with this is freshly plowed ground for most jurisdictions. Our goal should be long-term. There are some jurisdictions that are doing short-term type stuff, which arguably makes an impact for maybe 2 years. After that, it evaporates, it's gone, you're right back to status quo. So I don't know that there is, quote, a best practice. There's certainly a lot of things and tools out there, both federal and state programs that can help assist. But again, I think it's going to come right down to our land use, what's available, and the market need driving that and where we place it. So, good. Anything else on this item? Great.
We're ready to move on?
You feel you've got direction there?
Yes, sir.
Clear as mud.
So now we're going to talk about zoning districts within the LDR future land use district, the low-density residential. So to frame up the issue, LDR, outside of the affordable housing density bonus, which is not part of this conversation, but outside of that, LDR allows up to 4 dwelling units per acre. However, the permitted zoning districts within LDR do not support actually reaching 4 units per acre in most real-life applications. This is one major driver of why many LDR properties choose to go the PD route in order to get closer to that 4 units per acre density. Another thing we discovered in looking into this is that the current system really discourages LDR properties from providing parks or any sort of common amenities. So I'm going to get into why that is. So this is just a list of the zoning districts that are allowed in LDR and MDR, along with the minimum square footages of those lots, as well as the minimum lot widths. The lot widths are really just provided to make it more understandable, because I think that's the way most people think about lot sizes. So the smallest lot width that's permitted within LDR today is 70 foot. That's R1. We're also showing MDR, and we'll understand why that is soon, but those are 50 and 60-foot lots. So we did a hypothetical exercise assuming a 20-acre parcel. The 20 acres doesn't matter that much. It just created a good base for doing some of these calculations. This gets complex because LDR, or density, is calculated differently in different areas of the county. In what's called the urban core, it's calculated based on the whole property essentially, so you get a higher effective density. So in this case, that's 80 units on that 20-acre property. Whereas outside the urban core, you have to subtract out rights of way, which ends up in a lower effective density. So that, in this case, is 64 units on that 20-acre parcel. So theoretically, if you just divide the acreage by the lot sizes, it looks great. Like you can easily get to the allowable density or the allowable number of units within the zones that are allowed in LDR. However, that assumes that you don't build any infrastructure. Well, in real life, you have to build infrastructure. So you have to build roadways and stormwater ponds. So just looking at those two pieces of infrastructure, then suddenly you really, it gets much more difficult to get to those allowable densities. So I'm going to get to with infrastructure. So now, as soon as we start to look at actually providing that infrastructure, now you can't reach those densities within even the smallest lot zoning district, which is that 70-foot lot zoning district. And you'll see the orange and the red. Essentially, the orange is where you can reach it outside the urban core, because you're allowed a lower effective density anyway. And red is where you can't meet it either inside the urban core or outside the urban core under either method of calculation. Now, let's say you want to provide some open space, a pretty moderate amount of open space, 8%, above your wetlands and your stormwater. Well, now, again, you get even fewer units that you can put on your property if you decide to allow open space, because open space isn't actually required in any of the conventional zoning districts. So we just looked at a sample project. A lot of the projects that do happen within LDR today are PDs, but that's not terribly significant for this analysis, but it just looks at what density does a real-life project achieve. So this is actually going down to 50-foot lots, and they're only getting to 3 units an acre if you do it based on the urban core density method, or 3.6 units an acre if you do it based on the outside the urban core density method. So either way, even under a PD condition with 50-foot lots, they're not getting to the 4 units an acre on a real site. We also did some theoretical examples to kind of prove out similar conditions. This one was applying R1, which is those 70-foot lots on a sample site. Here we're getting to again, I have to say 2 different densities every time, but 2.2 or 2.4 units an acre, depending on which calculation method you use. But the bottom line is 70-foot lots, 2.4 units an acre at the outside, and that's without providing any sort of open space. So we did another theoretical exercise in which we went to 50-foot lots and we provided some open space. And so this is what that looks like. They're still only getting to 3.1 units an acre with the most generous method of determining density. But we get some open space out of it, and the developer gets a little bit closer to their density goal. So the takeaways are essentially the way that density is calculated relative to the allowable lots is really pretty impractical for new subdivisions. This is why we see a lot of PDs. The current regulations actively discourage providing any sort of open space within conventional developments. And so the idea is that providing more flexible standards would help the applicants to reach their goals of getting closer to the allowable density, while also meeting allowing for some improved standards on the county side to get things like open space. So the recommendation would be to allow R1B and R1BB within LDR with additional standards. This actually would require a concurrent update to the comprehensive plan, because there's a chart in the comprehensive plan that shows which zoning districts are allowed within which future land use districts. When we talk about additional standards, the things that we have in mind are minimum open space requirements. As I said earlier, there's currently no open space requirements for conventional subdivisions, although there are for residential PDs. In addition, we could look at connectivity requirements, which would help with emergency response and avoiding concentrations of traffic around one entrance and exit. This gets into a little bit of complexity with gated entries and potentially also looking at cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets. Some of those requirements are already built into the PD ordinance. So again, how can we get some of those benefits that we're currently getting out of the PD ordinance without putting everyone through that additional process? Street trees are another consideration there. So one of the other things that we looked at is under what conditions to require open space, because technically 3 units is a subdivision. Probably if you're doing 3 units, it doesn't make sense to have a common area open space. So what we're looking, as well as if you have very large lots, it may not make sense to have common area open space because you've got a lot of open space on your lot. So what we're looking at there is for lots of 1 acre or less, and project sizes that are big enough to go through the preliminary subdivision process. We could also potentially look at a minimum acreage. We do have minimum acreage thresholds within some of the other open space categories for MUCD and missing middle. So what we're looking for here is overall direction on whether to move forward with this approach. And with that, that's the end of item 2.
Okay. Any questions on this? Oh, I know, there's a lot we could get into.
So how about
Commissioner Hart.
I kick it off at because I like to spend space with the strategic. I think this is amazing. I think that this addresses, once it's fleshed out, a lot of the concerns that we've had with the PDs that we're looking at over and over and over again. And this gets to that need of creating open space and making things more affordable, all of the buttons. The devil's in the details, though. But I think we're onto something with this that needs to be pushed through.
If you go back to the analysis of, if you put this in place, what is the percentage of increase in density if we were to move forward with this?
So it's going to vary by property, so there's
Right.
not one answer. The example that we looked at here
Right.
took us from around 2.5 to around 3, so still not all the way up at 4, but that could vary depending on the site. Now, this is a pretty tight site, so I mean, if we're having trouble getting above 3.1 here,
Sure, well, I mean, call it a PD or not a PD, what you ultimately do, it gets back to the decisions we make on what we require to occur on a given tract of land directly impacts the affordability of these homes. That includes open space, that includes recreational portions, whatever we put in there directly impacts the bottom line cost to that buyer. I like the concept, I don't think it moves the needle far enough to give you enough density to even get real excited about. So, I mean, I'll support going that direction, but I don't know that it gives us, with the limited amount of property we have remaining in this county that can actually be developed, that's just not an acre here or half-acre lot there, or maybe 5 or 6 acres in the urban area, I don't know that we move the needle a whole bunch. Just my 2 cents worth. But I will support anything that moves the needle at all. But I'd rather see it move in a direction that would be a substantial move.
and if I can add, just, as a reminder, this is on top of the missing middle and some other
Correct.
recent additions to the code.
I see Director Gomez at the mic, may want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, based on that question and that statement that you just made, should we be looking at something other than the 50 and 60-foot lots in conventional zoning? Should we be going to maybe even smaller lots or townhomes or duplexes? And I'm just putting the question out there to the board, if that's something that we should explore.
For me, it's everything should be on the table to address the problem. We've talked about cottage-type homes in the past. We've talked about these patio homes in the past. And it always comes down to almost the same answer, which is the property is so expensive you can't afford to do that product here in Seminole County. Once you pay the impact fees, once you meet the open area, once you meet the setbacks, once you meet the categories for lot sizes, you're just going through a machination of gymnastics to only find out you can't really do anything with it except what the basic entitlements are. And I think that's just an honest conversation we have to have on how those decisions impact what we're attempting to do here today. So I think we have to look at all of it. Commissioner Lockhart, we'll come right on down the line.
Okay.
This is such a yin and yang, to your point. If you squeeze the water in the balloon of this, it's gonna, like, there's only so much space. And by allowing flexibility in constricting those lot width requirements, and requiring the open space, I almost wonder if the affordability piece, I almost feel like, I think that might be kind of where you're going with this conversation, is the affordability of some of these homes. And I think that's a market-driven conversation regardless of the size, because there are some homes that are on very narrow lots in this community that are very, very unaffordable for the average homeowner. So I don't know that the lot width is driving cost necessarily. I think it's the product, probably, and the location. At some point in time, it's no longer low-density residential, so we probably just don't call it that, right? I mean, you're creating a medium-density residential community under an LDR umbrella because we're trying to create more density. And I know what you're trying to do. I understand it, I get it. I think with the open space requirements, I'd like to see us be a little more progressive with a small p, lowercase p, in looking at retention pond space, looking at low impact development incentives. I think, the straight line retention pond with the St. Augustine grass that goes all the way down to the water's edge that all of the engineers in this community love needs to be disincentivized, and maybe we somehow incorporate that into some of what we're talking about here, because with only 25% of I think, is that what it is? 25% of retention is allowed to be contemplated as open space? Is that what it currently is?
Today, I don't think there's an upper limit, but we will be talking about open space in the next section and talking in more detail about what counts and what doesn't count.
I think that communities like your example up there with the park up at the front and what have you, if you're trying to drive a feeling of community in these developments and having it really feel more like low-density residential, you wouldn't, and I'm designing your thing and I'm not trying to do that, but stick it in the middle and let everybody feel like it's a Central Park type of environment and people have access to it, rather than putting it up on a roadway where you just drive by it and then it's what you drive by. I think if we're going to do this, we have the ability to be much more restrictive in the type of feel of the community that we're talking about if we're making these lots so narrow. I mean, these are almost like reach out and touch your neighbor, right? And some people love that product, and so I don't. But I just think we need to be a little bit more aggressive in some of the things that we'll be requiring if we go down to these much narrower lots in low-density residential. That's a very rambling answer, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Constantine.
I think the people of this county want a quality of life. And, we've all heard every time we do a PD or something like that, and we hope that some trees are left, and then the next thing we do is we have a complete clear cut of the property. This looks like a complete clear cut of the property except what's in the wetlands. You know, I recall that we had that housing or the growth study, and there was, the question was not that we don't have enough land, Commissioner Zabauer, I think you mentioned that. I don't think it's a question of having enough land or the zoning for the land. I think, and you've said this, we've all said this, the thing we need to concentrate on is the redevelopment of projects. You know, the more, you know, I believe that we need to have as much open space as we possibly can. And you said you're going to talk about that next. And, you know, we're talking about squeezing a unit here or a unit there. My main concern is that we do have in the zoning, regular zoning, not PD, but regular zoning, you know, the open space, the amenities, if you will, so that they can provide, you know, housing there. But I think our concentration needs to be on the redevelopment of property and how we are able to not only make that affordable but meaningful as far as the quality of life. You know, Commissioner Lockhart said it's a rambling answer. I'm giving another rambling answer, but the fact is, you know, again, I don't think the mission is to squeeze out a few more lots. I think the mission is to make sure that the housing developments that are being built are ones that are sustainable and will be ones that people will want to live and maintain their value. And so therefore, I'm looking at more that, you know, if we need more units, then that's a question of redevelopment. But in the development of this, I don't want to see more clear cut. I do not want to see people going, as you said, to PD to squeeze out 4 more units. If this gives us straight zoning opportunities, then I am in favor of it. I just don't like the way it looks at all. I think I wouldn't live there. I wouldn't want to live there. I mean,
Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we can sit here and say one scenario over another because the market's going to bear what the market's going to bear. What I'd like to see is what are the underlying costs that we have control over, and I think each one of us said it in different ways. Is it the impact fees? Is it the road impacts? Is it the stormwater? What are the hidden costs? They're not hidden to the developer because he has to charge for them. The person that's paying for it is the person that's buying into that subdivision or that development. That's what the cost is. So in all of those two different scenarios, you're squeezing out 0.68 units per acre. Is that going to cover their cost? I can't sit here and tell you because I don't know what all those hidden costs are. I can tell you, you know, what categories there are, but I can't tell you what the cost of the developer is. And I'm going to dovetail what my other commissioner is saying. I'm not going to sit here and just keep on rambling. It needs to be a true conscious level of discussion of what are those costs that the developers are going to have to look at to drive that cost to cover their, and that's bringing the price of homes up. So.
Well, I think you know we could talk this one to death, of course, and I think we've got a lot of ground yet to cover with your presentation. But I keep hearing the narrative of quality of life. Quality of life is in the eye of the beholder, and the reality is there are people in this county that love to live in the rural area, love to have lots of trees and bears and deer and turkeys and mice and squirrels and all those things around them with no neighbors. There's other people that like to live in a beautifully oak outlined community on half-acre lots. There's people that love to live on 1-acre lots. And there are a great deal of people that want to be as close to a Publix and a dry cleaner and a Pizza Hut as they possibly could be and could care less about a tree. So it comes down to, we're already an urban county. we're densely populated. We only have so much land between the Wekiva Protection Area and the East Rural Area, which is great. We just have to have a candid conversation. Are we going to really address the attainable affordable housing issue or not? And understand that every decision we make, whether it's how we calculate the density, how we do the impact fees, always going to impact that. The redevelopment is absolutely an issue. We incentivize that with impact fee changes in that urban core to incentivize people to develop there. We've already done that. So I think we're going to have to visit this much further and really figure out what we want to be when we grow up, maybe. And I think those decisions we all have to understand and make if we really want to address this issue. So, Commissioner Hurry, you have anything else? Or we move to the next slide?
I think we need to move to the next slide, but I think that given that, we've given you absolutely no direction on that specific item. So I just want to be honest about that. Good luck with that. So, but from the perspective of, you raised a really good question, and that is, we continue to talk about we want to address this issue, but maybe we really don't.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that question, perhaps, based on what I'm saying. I'm also going to say that we did a good job with impact fees when we did it, and that word keeps coming up in this conversation. I personally have no interest in going backwards on impact fees because it impacts the entire rest of the community in a negative way, and if you're building, you need to pay for the impact.
Right.
But that is sounding like that's where this is headed, and I just want to say I don't want to readdress that.
No, not at all. I mean, your impact fees were adjusted because the infrastructure is already in place. And
I understand.
So that impact is much different for me to redevelop 5 acres in the urban core than it is 5 acres that's not in the urban core. That's why there are different impact fees. There's no sense charging somebody to have an impact that they actually has already been paid for.
I do understand why we have the impact fees and why they're different. I'm saying that based on how this has been heard by the public, there may be a perception that we're about to go backwards on that. And I don't think that's what we were saying, but I'm calling that out.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would interpret that. I mean, that's coming up to be revisited as per the ordinance, I think, next year, to revisit that as part of that ordinance. But I think, to your point, I'm not sure we all understand that the certain decisions we make, how it impacts this issue when we give direction to staff for how we calculate whether it's retention, recreation, open space, all those things directly relate to the cost of a home or an apartment, or if you call it an apartment, developer builds the apartment, the rent goes accordingly to the cost. So, Commissioner Lockhart.
I think it's really important that we not confuse a lack of agreement for a lack of understanding.
Agreed.
And I would also say, since we are talking about impact fees, that's actually something I have on my district report this afternoon. Not all impact fees address the same impacts. One of those is educational impact fees. Those are intended to address the capacity and the need for increased capacity in our public school system. The school district is woefully behind on getting their study done and to us so that we can address that. I was going to ask at that later today, but might as well do it now since we're talking impact fees, if the board would give the county manager direction to write a letter to the superintendent on behalf of the board, asking them when we can expect to get their study back to us. Because educational impact fees are not intended to always go up. They are intended to be commensurate with the need of the district and the need of capacity. And right now, I am being told that capacity is waning, and therefore, educational impact fees can do this and be completely acceptable, because if you can't spend the money to create capacity because you don't have the need for it, you're sitting on a pot of money, you're continuing to charge developers an increased fee that perhaps is not needed. So I'm keenly aware and very annoyed, frankly, right now that this is being sat on. So if I could get consensus from the board to give the county manager direction to send that letter, I would love it.
I'm happy to do that.
we're almost 6 years behind.
Yeah. I mean, the county manager and I have discussed it, what's going on here. I don't know that we have gotten an answer.
Yeah, and we've made several, I know Mr. Gomez has made several calls over there, and they're saying they're in the middle of their study. Is that right, Jose? That's right now. They have not given us a date when the study will be complete, but
No, they have not given us a
we
schedule.
have been Jose's in contact with them regularly on that.
I would
but-
just like a letter in writing to them, asking the question and seeing what the
Sure.
answer is that we
I can do that.
might get
Draft
back
it.
in writing.
See that?
I can do it.
Send it.
Thank you
It's good.
for
Send it.
allowing me to go down that path, and now I don't have to do it this afternoon.
Well, to that point, I wonder, and we don't know, if school attendance and demand is waning,
It is.
why?
Well, that's not our concern. It just is.
Well, maybe our concern as far as land development codes and so forth, and as how that may be impacted or not impacted, for that matter. I think that's a viable question. So I think we have a lot of work to do in this area, it sounds like. I think you've heard everybody's concerns. I think we got a lot of work still in that arena. So with that, let's try to move on to the next one.
Okay. So this discussion, maybe surprisingly, is actually going to be one of the narrower discussions, so we'll see, at least on my end. Small lot mixed use addresses updates to the comprehensive plan that were adopted after the LDC updates were drafted and adopted. They help to address new densities and intensities that are permitted in the centers and corridors. There was also a study that was done during the comprehensive plan update specifically on small lots to look at where they were located in the county and where they might be appropriate to have mixed use. So the result of out of that came the question, does the land development code support the development of these small lot mixed use buildings in appropriate locations? And the original question was, do we need a new zone? And the answer is we don't. Basically, these small lot mixed use types can be accommodated through two existing zones, the missing middle and the MUCD, with some fairly minor tweaks. So looking at the missing middle, essentially the need there is to clarify where and how commercial can be integrated into missing middle products. Essentially, missing middle is allowed in places like C1 districts. So there's no reason that if you're in a C1 district, you wouldn't be allowed to do all the uses that you can do within that C1 district integrated into those missing middle buildings. So that essentially answers the question on whether you can do a small lot mixed use building there. So that just requires some clarifying language in the code. When it comes to MUCD, the Mixed Use Corridor District, that zone was really written with the intent of dealing with larger projects, larger redevelopment projects. But there are some individual lots, 50 to 70-foot lots, that fall with commercial zoning or commercial flu within these corridors and now have access to some of these higher densities. Which on a small lot, that higher density may not be a very big building, but the density really stacks up when you're on a small lot. So the opportunity with the MUCD is to carve out a specific exception for small lots. We're just defining small here as lots under a quarter acre that would provide flexibility on side and rear setbacks. If it's just one building, the need for those side and rear setbacks aren't necessarily the same if you're talking about a big project. The other ask there is that if you are backing up to single family, for instance, that the height would be limited to 2 stories. Right now, MUCD only has 3 and 5 stories. It doesn't have any provision for a limitation to 2 stories, but that 2-story limitation probably makes sense if you're backing right up to single family, and then particularly if you have some flexibility on the setbacks. So that is it for for small lot mixed use.
Anyone have any inquiries on this?
I have one.
Oh, Commissioner Herr.
Does it matter what the single family is? If the single family is 3-story, do you want to limit it to 2-story? I don't know that we have much of that, but we could, given all the new things that we're doing.
We could consider that, but that hasn't been a consideration. In a lot of these areas we're looking at, the single family is actually 1 story for the older single family, but we could carve out something for that.
I think we just need to plan for the future.
Okay.
Oh, open space. So, open space, as promised. So this is a summary table of how open space, the purpose of open space is described within the Land Development Code. It's a lot of features, so it says, you know, it's stormwater, it's buffers, it's landscaping, it talks a little bit about aesthetics and amenity. And this is a summary of the requirements for what counts as open space. They look really similar. So basically, the purpose of open space within the Land Development Code is just kind of a list of what counts as open space. So the recommendation on review of that is to really think about going one level up and talking about what is really the purpose of open space. What is the why? So as we talk about the why of open space, one why is preservation of natural resources and wildlife habitats. Open space standards can already incentivize shared access to natural lakes because you have to have that access to count a portion of your natural lake as open space. There was added within the recent update a 25% tree save requirement, so developers within residential subdivisions can't go in and take out all the existing trees. They are now required to do a 25% tree save. Like other things we've talked about, that was adopted fairly recently, so we may not see a lot of built results of that yet, but we should see that in new subdivisions going forward. Natural lakes and wetlands are also important for natural resources and wildlife preservation, but they also are typically dealt with through other standards. The Water Management District, there's plenty of standards on the books that require certainly the preservation of natural lakes and in large part the preservation of wetlands in many circumstances. Another big picture purpose of open space is recreation for people that live there, people that work there, people that may be visiting a site. Open space standards are really the only potential way that this gets achieved within the Land Development Code. We also talk about another purpose of open space being greenery for well-being. People benefit from being surrounded by or having access to green areas. There's a couple of ways this is addressed within the Land Development Code. It's also addressed through buffers, tree planting requirements, and other landscape requirements. And finally, there's sometimes when we're in public meetings, and I'm sure you also hear concerns about overdevelopment. This is another element that is addressed in multiple ways. So it's addressed through density limitations, ISR, which is impervious surface maximum ratios, buffers, and this varies by area of the county. So we talked about, for instance, in areas of redevelopment, there's a desire to see more development. So putting in limitations really need to make sense they have to be keyed into the right place for the right solution. Another thing here is, most developments within the county use surface retention, which is also just kind of an inherent limitation on the amount of development. So when we look at these benefits, the two that really stick out as being solely the thing that open space requirements can do are preservation of natural resource and wildlife habitats, specifically uplands, which aren't necessarily protected by the wetland requirements, and active and passive recreation for people who are on the site for whatever reason. So the big picture recommendation there is to build into the code really what is the purpose of open space and not just a list of features. We really need that why. In general, the open space chapter is somewhat complex, and I know you can't read probably the table on the right, but that's probably an example of some of the complexity. I'd also note that table kind of mixes up some things that are different categories. So I think fountain is in there, but also wetlands. So those are fairly different things. So it probably makes sense to break this out a little bit more by category. So we see a number of opportunities, and we won't go through every one, basically to condense the chapter, to minimize repetition, and to increase clarity so that people really understand, applicants understand what's being asked of them, and the public understands what's being required. There's also, another example of things in this table that aren't necessarily so useful is things that are not allowed anywhere. Like, why are they even in the table? They can just be excluded everywhere. Another opportunity is to look at the recent work that was done in the open space standards for missing middle and PD. So those are more recently drafted open space standards, and to think about how we can align the open space chapter with some of those more recently written standards. Some examples of provisions within MM and PD are minimum project requirements for open space. So if we're going to have meaningful recreational spaces, they need to be of a size that makes sense. And also to focus on commonly usable open space. So making sure that those spaces are accessible to the community, that they're of a minimum size that makes sense, and minimum dimensions that make sense. The other thing that we would look at is the quantity of open space required. Currently, it's 25% is kind of the base requirement, except, for instance, in conventional single family, there's 0% requirement. And does that make sense to have 0% requirement for residential outside of the PD system? So some of the considerations, and this mirrors what we talked about within the LDR section, to look at requiring open space for subdivisions with lots of 1 acre or less. We could also look at enhanced open space credits. So if you're providing a higher value feature, whether it's a higher environmental value or a higher use value for the community members, that you would get extra credit for providing that type of open space. Also potentially looking at varying the amount of open space by use and limiting the amount of retention that can be counted towards open space. So now there's really isn't any limitation on the amount of stormwater ponds that can count towards open space. So it's typical for neighboring counties to have some cap on that you can't have most or all of your open space be retention area. So that's it for open space. And then we have 2 more, which are buffers and fences.
Anything on open space at this point? Okay.
Okay. Buffer standards. So this one, I would say, is also really just a streamlining exercise, looking at the buffer standards to reorganize them to better align with how people actually use the chapter, adding some additional diagrams for clarity, and condensing and clarifying language where we can. And thinking also about how it relates to other open space standard or other landscaping standards. So for instance, there's instances where there's a reduction in the buffers and that landscape can be located elsewhere on the site. One of the things we're also proposing is looking at requiring that a certain percentage of the trees that are planted within buffers are native plants. This is really low-hanging fruit. We've talked a decent amount about native plants within this forum. Trees are a great way to accomplish native plants because they're relatively easy to identify. They're pretty easy to, once established, they stay there. They don't have the same maintenance requirements as some of the other types of native plants that we might look into. And so this is really just low-hanging fruit for how to incorporate additional native plants into the system. Buffers are also one of the primary landscaping requirements within a lot of development within the county. And then I would suggest we keep going on walls and fences because there's some interrelation. So we're looking, and I will say that we're looking specifically at walls and fences for commercial properties and subdivisions, so not on individual residential lots. So right now, sometimes there's some confusion on where the plantings are located on a site relative to the walls or fences. So as we mentioned in the buffer section, adding some diagrams to clarify where that makes sense. One of the driving ideas would be, if you're on a right-of-way, on a street, we want to see the landscaping. So the landscaping needs to be located outside of any sort of wall or fence. It gets a little more complicated when you're talking about side and rear. So side and rear, one of the things that comes up occasionally that we want to avoid is having double walls. So one development's required to have a wall, the neighbor is required to have a wall. At some point, who's protecting who from what? And also, probably more seriously, that can create unmonitored spaces that are difficult to maintain, difficult to have security situation. So one of the things that we can look at is just simply having a requirement in the code that if there's already a wall, you don't need to build another wall. Also potentially looking at non-opaque fencing, so things that you can see through to provide more monitoring, and also so you can see any plantings that happen to be planted in that area. So making sure that we're not requiring shrubbery and similar landscaping that nobody's ever going to see. Another way to solve that is to require trees instead of shrubbery, so they actually go over the walls if the intent is for somebody else to see them. The problem with putting them on the other side of the wall is that, again, you can't, then the property owner has a lot of trouble maintaining it. We had a lot of conversations on when and if to require cement walls, and where we landed was essentially if a developer chooses to do opaque fencing against a right-of-way, that at that point it makes sense to require a cement wall. The main reason for that being maintenance. Those cement walls are more durable and don't tend to decline from a maintenance perspective the way some other materials decline. So that isn't requiring that, but if a developer chooses to provide that opacity, that they would be required to do it in a way that's durable. There are some other instances where cement walls are required, such as to screen nuisances like refuse or outdoor storage, and those would continue to be required. Now, we also look at requiring that, if you have a really long wall, you would be required to have some gaps for pedestrian connectivity. In many instances, you might be required to have a street anyway, so if the street's already there, that solves that problem. But if it's not, you'd have some access. But not getting into any more detail in terms of how that wall is constructed, that's for the private sector to determine. So that's it. Really, I just have here the list of topics so that to jog your memory if you have questions, I guess, on the last three, since we talked about the first three in depth already.
Any further comments or inquiries?
Not at this time.
Just one.
Mr. Constantine.
On the question of the trees, and we're not talking about individual citizens in their homes. We're talking about developments as they come.
Correct.
Why 60% native trees? Why not 100% native tree? The point is I don't, I don't see what the magic, what's the magic number? Why did we pick 60%? And why would there be, when you're developing a property, is there a real need not to have native trees? I don't get that.
So one instance we talked about, specific to rural areas, is there may be a desire to have edible trees, and we wouldn't want to prohibit that. So that's one very specific example.
Citrus trees, excuse me, I'm sorry, but citrus trees aren't native?
They may not be the only, figs, other.
Not all of them, okay. All right.
I can go back to my landscape architect and ask more questions about that, but the other reasons would be just the flexibility of the private sector to make those aesthetic choices. Because right now we're going from 0.
Okay, that was the only question. Why was 60% the magic number?
Felt good.
Mm-hmm.
Felt good.
75%, 100% feels great.
Okay. Anyone here from the public to speak on these items?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you all giving us a presentation. I'm sure we will continue this dialogue well into between now and the next visit you have with us. So thank you all very much for your patience. Does anybody need a break, or are you ready to keep on going?
I can take a 5-minute break.
You want a 5?
Yeah, just 5.
All right, let's take a 5. Okay, we're back on the record, folks. Our next item up is our indoor sports complex, our indoor sports facility. Rick Durr, Parks and Recreations Director.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, Rick Durr for the record, Director of the Parks and Recreation Department. We're going to briefly move through this process, and it's really an update to the last time we were before you to talk about the facility itself.
Did you say briefly?
I said briefly,
okay.
Yes.
Say it
That
again,
is a
say it
promise.
Half an inch packet.
Drag it out.
So the first overall is just the timeline of what's happened since the last time we were before you to talk about the structure itself. That was in May of last year. Since then, you've had multiple meetings on the TID and went through the formation of the TID ordinance and then the approval of the TID program. So to give you an update on where those projections are at and where the TID program currently rests, will be Guy Cunha.
For the record, Guy Cunha, Director, Economic Development Tourism. We're looking at a couple of our updated numbers that we've been reviewing in May 2023 and May 2024. When we look at calendar 2024, we're still at a little over 2.2 million visitors with about 1.41 million room nights. Our occupancy is at about 70%, average daily rate a little less than $110. And that key indicator that's more closely aligned to tourist development tax, your revenue per available room is at $76. This is at a decrease of 1%, so right in line with that plus minus 3% plateau definition by Smith Travel Research. One caveat to this slide is we did have 2 hotel properties open during this time, the Home 2 in Sanford and the Home 2 in Lake Mary. When we did the breakdown of the day-of-week demand, we still see that we're mainly weekend-driven at 77%. Average daily rate, we are seeing a more expensive rate on the weekend at $113. revenue per available room at $70 weekday and close to $87 on weekend. Again, year-over-year comps is a drop in 1% on weekday on the RevPAR and a drop of 2% on weekend. One of the key indicators that we looked at is through our partnership with Zartico. Zartico evaluated all visitors overnight and drive market visitors. It was about 24,000 devices that were evaluated through their tracking system. And what they saw was the sports facility visitors are 78% more likely to use an accommodation than any other visitor in Seminole County. Smith Travel Research also updated their forecast, still in line with plateau numbers all the way through 2026. We see minimal change to occupancy, ADR, and thus that star indicator there all the way in 2026, a minus 0.4% year over year. Zartico also reflects a plateau being plus minus 3% on visitor performance indicators, mainly visitor spending. So we worked with Downs and St. Germain. They're the organization, the research company that did the most comprehensive visitor study in Seminole County. So they have all the data from that years-long survey study that they did. There were boots on the ground at specific sites. We had them conduct a meta-analysis. That's going to be the upcoming 3 bar graphs. We gave them all the Smith Travel Research data. We gave them our initial indoor complex feasibility studies done by Hunden Strategic Partners, and we had them use their 12-month visitor study of Seminole County as well, and they provided us the data. The blue in the bar graph is if we continue with our current 6 complexes that we use for sports. The green is the additional demand that would incur that they believe with the indoor sports complex. So upon the building of the indoor sports complex, we see that we would expect more than doubling of the out-of-county visitor economic impact to Seminole County to be about $64.5 million. Also projected out-of-county visitors. These are also overnight visitors. We see a very similar comp with the blue plateauing over the next 5 years, but also seeing a doubling in that demand to 152,833 out-of-county visitors, but these are overnight specific visitors they were presenting. And then similarly, our projected total room nights. We see the plateau effect on projected room nights to our hotels, but we see more than doubling of the overnight visitors specifically for sports on the building of this indoor complex to a total of 85,648 by year 5. And then the last slide for me, all the potential tourism challenges that we've discussed over the years are still relevant. The demand plateau is still relevant. TDT constraints, TDT currently has not been changed in a manner that impacts our ability to collect more. Legislative uncertainty, as we know, TDT is always at the forefront of further expanded allowable usage. Increased competition, there is a point to be made on increased competition. As we see the international markets softening, our travelers aren't mainly international markets, they're drive markets and regional, but one thing to keep in mind is the softening of that international market is not a secret. So we're seeing increased competitions from larger tourism offices for our regional and drive markets. So just keeping our market share is becoming bigger of a challenge. And then final point is increased risk due to venue limitations. All 6 of our complexes that we have are all outdoors. So there's very limited options expanding on any other possible sports and travel demand.
Thank you, Guy. So we'll revisit and recap the concept of the indoor sports complex. And again, as a refresh, we've been looking at this particular facility going back to 2013. We had an original pro forma done at that particular time. And moved that through the years, over the last 10 years, where we've looked at it both internally as well as externally. We've updated this list since the last time you saw us. We've done the Park System Master Plan as well that looked at all of our facility needs, as well as updating exactly what the indoor complex could be for you all. Now, back in 2014 to 2017, we were looking at a certain size of a facility that the market was bearing up at that particular time. There was one outlier to all of that, which was a much larger facility that was just opening up just north of Atlanta, and we took a look at that specifically and really drilled down to understand what that was going to do potentially to the market. So some of the other things that we had heard going through this process is that it's just not about sports. It's the idea of also having the ability to have graduations at this location as well as any other special events or to act as a venue of some sort. The site location that we looked at has not changed. It's at the Moore Station Fields complex, just right around the corner on Lake Mary Boulevard from the Boomba Sports Complex. And a year ago, we brought back a development concept presented in the Hunden Plan, which at that particular time, we heard the board loud and clear that said it was too small. So we then brought off and dusted off the larger complex, the comparable being the 172,000 square foot complex, and we looked at a couple of different options, both all surface parking as well as the addition of a parking deck, and that was discussed with this board back in May. So at that particular time, and this is where we are currently, we've got a pro forma and a design of an indoor complex of about 172,000 square feet. It may or may not have a parking deck, and at that particular time, the area on this slide highlighted in yellow said that without a parking deck, we were looking at possibly a $66 million complex. With one, we're at about a $100 million complex, and as you all know, the prices on anything have gone up since then. So we need to be able to further refine this concept based on exactly what we want out of this complex. So we'll revisit on our various revenue or funding sources for this project. Has not changed. We continue to spend about $1.64 annually on the debt service on the Boomba, two complexes, the Boomba Soldiers Creek and the sports complex. The debt service on the sports lighting is retiring in 2027, so that's an opportunity that we'll have along the way. As well as we've now funded the artificial turf replacement at Boomba. We've got $5.3 million in reserve, and if you recall, we had that before you with about a $4.8 million project, so we should have some money left over in reserve. Other funding initiatives that we have, we've got the adoption of the fourth generation infrastructure sales tax. This project does appear on that list as a placeholder for wherever we need to find supplemental revenue and funding, as well as staff is working on an enhanced sponsorship package that gets us ready for what a complex of this nature would bring to the marketplace so that we're ready to take advantage of that as we're designing the complex. So since that time, TID, as Guy had mentioned, is now in effect. The first collection is next week. We're looking at about $3.2 million a year conservatively is what TID would bring in. If you wanted to look at the projected bond capacity for that, it's about on the lower end in the low 50s. Again, this doesn't quite match that $66 million floor that we were looking at with the larger facility as well. So we've got a little bit of a gap and some work to do on what the financial package might look like. So with all of those questions still being out there, what staff is requesting of the board is to allow us to move forward with bringing in a program plan manager who is an expert at doing this. And the purpose of doing so would allow us to focus and refine the development program for the project, building off of our existing analysis with pro formas, but get us a project that the board can set, here's what the development project needs to be, here's the size that we're looking for, and then develop not just a scope, but also a budget for the project. So we can narrow that gap and really land where we think the sweet spot might be for this. So we want to be able to bring the subject matter expert in here to work with us and build consensus with the board and with staff so that we can then move forward with hiring an architect and a contractor to make this project a reality. During that time, staff will also be pulling data and information on all of the various options that we'll have to look at in terms of operational budgets and staffing, so that when we're looking at a development project, we're not just looking at the price of building it, but we're also looking at the price of running it. So with that being said, that concludes the presentation. Hopefully that was quick enough for you. That wasn't too bad. And that's where we stand. Thank you.
Good work, Rick. Any questions from the board before I go to the public? Seeing none, is there anyone here from the public to speak on this matter?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we will close public input. All right, we'll start at the far end with Commissioner Lockhart and work our way across.
I think it's imperative that we bring on a subject matter expert, and I look forward to seeing that person and talking to them when that occurs. One of the things that I have talked about, and we mentioned this in our briefing, is as much as it is a sports complex, it's also an event venue, and so how we talk about it may be important moving forward, because we do want to have it be able to be used for things other than athletics, said the basketball coach's daughter, so sorry. The other thing that I think will be important to glean from, if not our subject matter expert, others who have these types of facilities in their communities, and this has happened a little bit with Boom Bah, so I'm not throwing shade, I'm just saying, initially when it was envisioned, there was going to be some time for local teams set aside so that the Seminole County community kids could experience playing on those fields. And as happens, competition of, if we can put heads in beds and this is what we're paying for it through, slowly but surely that field time gets eked away and there's not much left for local play. So I can foresee a potential conflict where we have 7 high school graduations all in a particular month, and we've got a great offer on the table from someone who wants to host an event here that's going to generate a ton of revenue. That tension and that pull, I think we'll need to try and address ahead of time so that we don't wind up doing to this facility what has kind of happened with Boom Bah. We need to be able to allow our locals to be able to use it. That's my only 2 cents.
Mr. Constantine?
Not throwing shade.
Yeah.
That was great.
Sunlight.
No, I thought that was a great line. Way to go. Okay. I think what I gleaned out of all of this is flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. And I think that's, in another way, that's what the commissioner just said. I'm saying it. I'm not sitting here trying to design it, but we should be able to use every inch of that facility, whether it's inside, outside, on top of the parking facility, wherever, both for financial purposes as well as for use of our citizens, as well as, for use of our tourists. So I'm excited about bringing in the new person too. Thank you for the enthusiasm that both you and Guy showed. And Guy, congratulations on the 40 under 40.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick, I appreciate your presentation. Very well done, as always, as well as you, Guy. I do agree that we need to bring on a subject matter expert. One of the things that we could have done a little bit better for Boom Bah was looking into the future, because that's one of the shortcomings of it, is, what do you do next? And that's always a big issue, especially with competition the way it is, especially with all the other venues that are coming up out of the ground, either to the east of us or the west, or even to the south of us. So I look forward to speaking and getting someone on board, and well done. Very good.
From my perspective, the direction you've asked for, yes. I agree we move forward there. There'll be plenty of time to talk about with that individual and with the rest of us about the ultimate vision and where we actually land. So thank you. Commissioner Herr.
I agree with that with respect to the request, but I will point out that the math doesn't work, and we all need to have realistic expectations or be willing to have realistic expectations elsewhere in the spend of the county dollars. And so when I look at the wording that says, focus on refining the development program and project budgets by building on existing analysis, and then tie that back to the presentation, I would dispute with you that I don't think we all agreed on go big or go home and find the biggest one in the country and show me that one and add 2,000 square feet and let's build that. I don't think that's where I am. So I just want to be upfront about that. I think we bring the expert in and we get refinement, but refinement means everything's in play.
Okay. All right, I believe you've got direction, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else from the county manager or county attorney before we recess for lunch?
No, sir.
All right, we shall be in recess till 1:30.